Congressman Louis Gohmert joins us now a day after FBI Director James Comey outlined Hillary Clinton's, quote, extremely careless handling of classified information while she was Secretary of State. Congressman Gohmert, first, just your reaction to that press conference yesterday.
Well, I was amazed. He, as so many have said, he spent about 13 of his 15 minutes outlining a powerful case against Hillary Clinton and why she should be indicted. And then at the end, yanked the string and pulled it all back and said, no good prosecutor would pursue that case. And he said there was no direct evidence of intent. I mean, I've been a prosecutor, judge, chief justice. I know most of the time there's no direct evidence of intent. It's very rare that you have an email or an overt statement, I intend to do this. Now, Hillary may have had emails that stated that intent, and that's why those were destroyed. We'll never know.
Can content be considered not wanting to avoid disclosure rules?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It doesn't have to be an intent under a couple of different statutes. There's no requirement for intent to betray the United States. And in fact, the law that he cited, gross negligence is a basis for prosecution, and gross negligence is extreme carelessness, which he said they found. But a vocabulary word for perhaps the viewers, spoliation, S-P-O-L-I-A-T-I-O-N. It's a legal doctrine that's applied in some form in most every state, and it is under Federal Rule 35, that if a party has possession of evidence and that evidence is destroyed while in their sole possession, then the judge may instruct the jury that you may consider as direct evidence that they had, this party, in this case Hillary Clinton, had the evidence, it was destroyed in her possession, and therefore you take that as evidence of guilt or guilty knowledge, or the judge has the authority.
Going to the intent issue again?
Exactly. You can prove intent just by the fact that she destroyed some massive amounts of emails when she knew at least part of those before they were destroyed, they were being sought.
We know you're a former federal prosecutor, former judge. So what sort of precedent does this decision set in future cases when it comes to classified emails?
I don't think it sets any more precedent than the prosecution of General Petraeus, which, by the way, Comey, and this is from his words, that normally you don't prosecute unless it's clearly intentional or willful mishandling of classified information, vast quantities of material exposed in such a way as to support inference of intentional misconduct, indications of disloyalty to the United States, or efforts to obstruct justice. You didn't have any of those in Petraeus, but the one he didn't mention is if you have information, as Petraeus did about Benghazi, that would have put the administration in severe jeopardy of being reelected, then it's important to prosecute that person. That's what they did with Petraeus. He knew that what they were saying about Benghazi was a lie. It was not about a video. They didn't say it was. And they had to destroy him before he could destroy them. And, of course, they've got him on a rope right now because obviously, there are things he did that were inappropriate.
We know the Speaker wants to hear more from Director Comey, perhaps before the House Oversight and Government Reform.
I've heard all I need to hear.
Do you think that Director Comey should step down? One of our callers on a Republican line said that he doesn't trust him anymore.
Well, he's given us good reason not to trust him after yesterday. He's basically...
Was there a reason not to trust him before that?
I didn't have any reason not to trust him before that. He's been an honorable man. But one of your callers was saying, well, so many people don't know how it works here in Washington, and she works for the government. Well, it's true. The saying here in Washington, you've probably heard many times, but no matter how cynical you get, it's never enough to catch up. And it's just when you think it can't get much worse, are you kidding me? You laid out the case. This is basically a lay-down case against Hillary Clinton. You established gross negligence. You don't need direct evidence of intent. You've got gross negligence, and then he walks away from it.
Louis Gohmert is with us until about 8:45 this morning. Phone lines are open if you want to call in. Democrats 202-748-8000, Republicans 202-748-8001, Independents 202-748-8000. 8002. We're talking about the FBI director's recommendations yesterday. We'll also get into gun legislation making its way to the floor of the Congress, the House this week. But we'll start with Emily, Alexandria, Virginia, a Republican. Emily, you're on with Congressman Gohmert.
Hi, good morning. I want to start by making a quick comment, then I have a question for the congressman. My comment is that my husband and I both live in the Beltway in D.C., and every day we are entrusted with a certain amount of information that we were required under law to maintain and keep. If by any chance we were to make any gross negligence on behalf of any data we had, we would not only not have a job and not have clearance, but we might go to jail. Now, we have 2 little kids, so every day we think we need to stay above board, not only for our country, but also for our children. So that's my comment. Second, my question is, knowing that that's against the law and that anybody from GS 9 to GS 13, 14, 15, SES, DICEL would be required to, under law, give up their clearance for something like Hillary Clinton did, how can the Democratic Party or the Republican Party side with somebody that they know that law themselves and uphold somebody who's running for Congress that also has been put under oath and has to do the same federal training we all have to do, and yet be above the law on that?
Congressman.
Okay. Well, thank you, Emily. I really appreciate your work and your husband's work. It is a dangerous time to be working in the federal government in this modern era when it's so easy to make mistakes. And with the internet, it's, normally it's institutionalized unless you are sophisticated enough or have sophisticated enough friends to destroy the evidence before it can be come to light. But you raise a good question. How do you trust people like that? I mean, since Benghazi, I've talked to most of the immediate family members of people that were killed at Benghazi. They were particularly offended to have Hillary Clinton shake their hand with their loved one's body just arriving there and to say, we're going to get the guy that did the video, because the ones that told me said, we didn't care about a guy that did the video, even if it was about a video, which it turns out it was not. And Hillary Clinton emailed a couple of people, including her daughter, to say it wasn't. It was just, this was an attack. But they couldn't believe Hillary Clinton would look them in the eye and say that with the remains of their loved one right there. There are issues of credibility that are always at stake, but I just thank God that there are people willing to serve our government, like you and your husband, that are concerned about not violating the law. And I know it's a slap to people like you that work so hard to be honest and forthright, but please don't give up. We need you. We need people like you that are going to be honest no matter what's happening around you. I deal with some of the same problems myself.
We're talking with Congressman Louis Gohmert, Republican of Texas, member of the Judiciary Committee and chairman of the Natural Resources Investigative Subcommittee, here with us for about the next half hour. John is in Conestoga, Pennsylvania, a Republican. John, good morning.
No, I'm not a Republican. I called on the independent line. I'm an independent.
Oh, go ahead, John.
Yeah, I was surprised too. I listened to the whole thing yesterday when Comey made his statement, and I thought he was building up to the fact that she should be indicted. So, given that, and you being on the Judiciary Committee, are you going to now open a war criminals case against Bush, Cheney, Wolfowitz, Rumsfeld, and Rice for lying continually for years about the war in Iraq and the war in Afghanistan?
Yeah, well, obviously you've fallen victim to things that were said about Bush and Cheney and Rumsfeld. Everybody, including Hillary Clinton, believed that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. He had killed thousands and thousands of people, with poisonous gas, with weapons of mass destruction. When most of the countries in the UN supported resolutions requiring Saddam to come forward, he didn't. The biggest mistake that Karl Rove made during those years was just to advise Bush, don't worry, don't respond. And they didn't respond, and now we have people that think that lies were institutionalized when they weren't. Everybody believes Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction, except for a handful of people. Donald Trump says now that he didn't, but anyway, at the time, that's what people believed, and Saddam Hussein gave every indication of that. Bush's mistake was not in not responding. He followed the advice of his father, who Tony Snow, the late Tony Snow, told me that in '92, when Clinton kept making allegation after allegation of charges against him that were ridiculous, George H.W. Bush, a classy man, said, we're not going to dignify these with a response, we're not going to respond, and he went from about 90% approval down to losing the election. But Tony said he told him, trying to get him to respond at one point, Mr. President, when someone keeps attacking your honor and you don't respond, eventually people will assume you don't have any honor. And W. Bush refused to defend his honor, and now people like John believe he didn't have any honor, and it's really unfortunate because he is much more honorable than people gave credit.
I want to bring it to what's happening today
Sure.
and this week in the House of Representatives. Republican leaders expected to have some sort of gun legislation on the floor. The bill likely the one that was written by Senator John Cornyn of Texas, just to remind our viewers, that would grant the Attorney General the power to delay gun sales for up to 3 days for anyone suspected of terrorist connections. Authorities would then have to go to court to prove their case, or else the sale would go through. Democrats are rallying around a much stronger restrictions, a measure pushed by Republican Susan Collins of Maine. This is happening in the wake of that sit-in by Democrats on the floor of the House for a gun vote. Question for you is should this vote be happening in the floor this week in the wake of that sit-in?
It absolutely should not. 2 weeks ago, when we had a conference, I thought it was outrageous that as the majority party, we allowed the sit-in in violation of massive numbers of rules to go on unimpeded. And I was ready, I was challenging the sergeant at arms. So you only enforce the rules against Republicans? Is that the deal now? And he said, well, when we tell a Republican to stop violating the rules, you guys do. We've told them repeatedly, and they're not stopping their violation.
Just showed our viewers the video of you going down to the House floor during that sit-in and confronting Democrats during that sit-in. You were one of the few Republicans who went down the floor during that time.
Well, yeah, but this was after we had had our conference, and we had been told, don't worry, we were told, there will be severe consequences for these violations. Fine. There have been no severe consequences. Had I known that the only severe consequences was that there would be a gun restriction vote as they were demanding against the rules. And by the way, they wanted a debate. I came down to the well to give them a debate. They were saying it was all about a gun. Look at the shiny object in his hand. Don't look at the killer. I felt like, and I still feel like, they were dishonoring those victims in Orlando by refusing to recognize what it was that killed him. Yes, he had a gun. As I told them, if you're going to go after guns, the next thing, to be honest, you're going to have to go after pressure cookers, because that's what was used in Boston. And then go after box cutters, because that was used on 9/11. You've got to go after the people that are holding the weapon, not the weapon. And so I've said it was radical Islam that killed these innocent victims. And Frank Pallone of New Jersey yelled, "You're a racist." I couldn't believe he said that, because Islam is not a race that become Muslim. And there's no problem being Muslim unless you're a radical Islamist. And I said, he said he pledged allegiance to the Islamic State. He said, and you're a racist. How do you debate people? That's all they've got. And then after get yelled at, I'm a racist repeatedly, then Corinne Brown comes up and I said, he said he was pledging allegiance to the Islamic State. Corinne Brown said, that's a lie because it happened in my district. And I said, it's what he said. This came from Loretta Lynch. It's a lie because it happened in my district. And she kept saying that. It's a lie because... How do you debate people like that, John? You're a smart guy.
What did Speaker Paul Ryan say to you after that confrontation on the floor?
He didn't say anything immediately. The next day, I guess hours later, he said, well, you know, we'd ask everybody not to say anything, just ignore the Democrats, and you didn't do that, but hopefully you didn't do too much damage.
Would you do it again?
Yes. Just the height of frustration. They were dishonoring the dead by refusing to recognize what it was that killed him. It was a radical Islamist by his own words. And I was surprised Corinne Brown kept saying that was a lie, because that came from Loretta Lynch. If that's a lie, then she has to say Loretta Lynch lied to us. And I don't think she did on that occasion.
Let's get back to the phones. Rose is in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, a Republican. Rose, good morning. You're on with Congressman.
Good morning.
Good morning, Rose.
I just wanted to say kudos to Rand Paul, because he had the foresight to see that this Comey fella was not going to do his job. And furthermore, Obama jumping around like a Mexican jumping bean with Hillary. I mean, this is crazy. The Democrats are ruining our country. I used to be a Democrat, but no more. I got hip to what was going on. They want to call people racist. That's all they got is racist. And I got tired of that.
Rose referring to the fact that Rand Paul, the one senator who voted against confirming Director James Comey when he became FBI director.
Great point, Rose. And actually, most people where I grew up in East Texas were Democrats when I was growing up. And I helped a Democrat in the 70s. Didn't really care about party, just cared about the person. But Rose makes a great point. And I guess I actually said months ago, publicly in interviews, that Hillary Clinton will never be indicted as long as she doesn't criticize the Obama administration. Now, Bill got out there criticizing, and somebody got to him and told him to shut up criticizing Obama. But I said this months ago, as long as she doesn't criticize Obama or his administration, then she'll never be indicted. So I shouldn't have been surprised yesterday, and I really wasn't surprised. I was just still disappointed, because Comey overall is a decent guy. He just became part of the system.
Smyrna, Georgia is up next. Robert is a Democrat. Robert, good morning.
Hi, Robert.
Good morning. Hi. I can think of at least one other Secretary of State that has admitted to using their own private system for sending and receiving emails. Can you think of why that particular Secretary of State wasn't investigated or prosecuted?
Well, the use of emails is relatively new in history, and we've begun to learn more and more about how you handle classified material. And I'm not sure to whom you're referring, but I know there have been times that internet was not secure, and if you believe some of the experts, it's really not all that secure now. But as far as knowing why somebody that you're not mentioning didn't use a secure system, I don't know, except I know that this is a relatively new development in our history, because, you know, the internet's not all that old.
How about a couple calls from the Lone Star State? Bob's in Humble, Texas, a Republican. Bob, go ahead.
Good morning. I'd like to take us back to basics, and that's the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. And I know, Congressman Gohmert, I've seen you pull out the Constitution and Declaration in a document. I just had an occasion to look at it over July the 4th. It was handed out in a parade. And if you read through it, I think you see the problem in our country right now with both Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton. If you substitute the king with their names, you find out people who are above the law and want to make the law. And we fought 300 years ago to get rid of that kind of tyranny, and we're getting ready to go back to it. Or we've been back with the last 7.5 years. We're getting ready to re-elect or elect someone who's going to continue that. It's a travesty. What are your thoughts on that, Congressman Gohmert?
Well, I'm thrilled that you read it again. I'm sure you've read it times. Well, and I have to say, both parties have contributed to the point where we are in history. I mean, I really like George W. Bush. I think he's a lot more intelligent, a lot wittier, charming than people give him credit. But there were some things I profoundly disagreed with. I think No Child Left Behind was a travesty. It was the federal government forcing a one-size-fits-all across the nation. There were not enough done to secure our border during those years. And I tell you, the bill that we're going to vote on is a Republican bill. And Bob, let me just tell you what it says, and I hope it will alarm you, and you'll understand why I'll vote no against this.
You're talking about the gun legislation.
Yeah, and John, you mentioned it was Cornyn's language, but it says when the Attorney General is notified of a request to transfer a firearm, I'll just get to the chase. The Attorney General shall, as appropriate, notify relevant federal, state, local law enforcement agencies concerning that, and being notified prospective transfer of firearm. So the Attorney General of the United States or the United States Attorney for the district in which the licensee is located will delay may delay the transfer of the firearm or explosive for a period not to exceed 3 business days, and file an emergency petition in a court of competent jurisdiction to prohibit the transfer. And that has to receive the highest priority. Well, I mean, I made a living for a while interpreting laws like this. It doesn't say what court, a court of competent jurisdiction. If the government is saying that you have terrorist ties, they could file this with the FISA court, the secret court. So you'd have to go before the Star Chamber. I used to have some faith and confidence, since these judges are confirmed by this. But after what Snowden released, we saw there was an affidavit saying we need all of the information on every telephone user of Verizon and all of the calls they've made, and the judge just signed, oh, sure, no requirement for specificity like the Constitution requires. He signed off on it. I lost all faith in the FISA court. Doesn't mean Snowden didn't commit treason, but it sure was an eye-opener. But what I'm telling you is, suppose you're in Humble, Texas, and you go to buy a gun. You may find yourself one day later, if you really want to buy the gun, in a federal FISA court in Washington, D.C., trying to counter an affidavit that says you had a terrorist tie. You talked to somebody that they think was a terrorist, even though never committed a terrorist act. Now prove you're not a terrorist. And all of a sudden, to buy a gun, you're in a court miles away. You didn't have time to accumulate evidence. And I'm telling you, this is a scary provision. And I until this week, had not mentioned publicly, but a year and a half ago, I was invited to speak at Cambridge University and Oxford University, a number of places in those universities. Honored to be there and speak. But when I was flying back, and I'm coming through security at Heathrow, a guy that was in charge of the little security area where I was came over to me and said, sir, I'm really sorry. I know who you are, but your own Department of Homeland Security has told us you're a risk. We have to thoroughly search you.
Was this a U.S. official or a UK security
this was
official?
a UK official there. He said, your own Homeland Security said you're a risk. I'm really sorry. We've got to thoroughly search you. And so they did. And I knew I couldn't blame them because it was my own Homeland Security. I probably have been kind of rough questioning, and before him, Napolitano, especially when she lied a number of times during testimony. But I don't want to give these people any more power over my person than is absolutely necessary, and this is not a good provision. So you're on
some sort of list right now?
Well, I don't know that I was on a list, but that day they said they were alerted. I traveled internationally in the past week to Jordan and Turkey. it's nice to be able to shore up friendships with people who have actually been friends. And I'm not saying Erdogan in Turkey's a friend. He's not. He's taken the country in the opposite direction that Ataturk brought it. But they didn't tell me I was singled out by Homeland Security, so maybe they're easing up on me now.
Staying in Texas, let's go to your district in Nacogdoches.
Oh,
Kervin is waiting, an independent. Kervin, good morning.
Hey, Kervin.
Good morning. How you doing? I want to ask a question about Benghazi.
Okay.
The ambassadors over there that got killed. Now, I know they say Hillary is totally responsible, but will the Congress be more responsible because they didn't give the funds to give protection over there? They said we couldn't pay for it. So since they denied the funds to send the troops over there or whoever to be over there when this happened, before it happened, would make Congress, since they wouldn't support them over there, to be more responsible than Hillary because they cut off the funds?
Well, thank you. And I guess that's one of those things that gets spread that is not accurate, but is out there in the media. Hillary Clinton had at her disposal millions and millions of dollars. It was up to her to say where the priorities were. We also know there was massive military people that could be deployed. I was told by the commander at Ramstein Air Force Base in Germany that jets can get from Ramstein to Benghazi or to Libya in 3 hours. And when I said, your jets could have been at Benghazi, he said, well, you know, they had ordnance on them. It would have taken a long time to change that out. Well, we had them much, much closer. And there are people that tell me they're afraid, they can't talk about it, but that they were there close enough to have made a difference, but they can't talk about it. So I don't blame Congress. Congress appropriated enough money. Hillary Clinton could have made it a priority, or Hillary Clinton, when every other country was pulling out their embassy, she could have pulled out our consulate there in Benghazi. But the second in the State Department there in Libya testified, well, he told us before he testified back with the committee staff that Hillary Clinton had hoped to make a farewell tour, and she was going to put Benghazi on the farewell tour. And unfortunately, the fall happened, but she had hoped to say, when everybody else pulled out their embassy and lost faith, I stood by you, and it's paid off. Well, it didn't pay off. That was Hillary Clinton's call, and I still would like to know, did she go to bed, she and the president go to bed that night and sleep while those people under their watch that were under their control, they were being killed? How could you sleep while that was going on? Well, we don't know. They won't tell us what they did that night, but we know they would not allow people within reach to go help. And it's never been made public that I'm aware of. But the little private jet that was finally brought into Benghazi to pick up the survivors, it wasn't even an American jet. It didn't have a ramp. David Ubben, that had most of his life, he said that, you know, well, somebody at Oz told me that he kept passing out because of the pain. But because it was a little private jet, because the president, Hillary, wouldn't send an adequate jet for them, they had to beat him and scrape his half-missing leg against the entrance to the jet to try to get him in. They tried over and over. I said he was coming in and out of consciousness because of the pain. They finally took some seats out so they could get him in. That's not caring very much about the people that are dying while they're serving you.
Let's go to our line for Republicans. Betsy's waiting, Elkhart, Kansas. Betsy, good morning. You're on with Congressman Gohmert.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for taking my call. I would like to point out that whenever I was a kid, and like if we were driving or something like that, and like if we didn't stop far enough behind the stop sign or something like that, and we would get pulled over by the police, they would always say that ignorance is no excuse.
Yeah.
And you know, you don't have an excuse. And I just was wondering if we could do anything about this, like if we made calls to our senators or anything like that. If there was, I mean,
in the wake of the FBI recommendation? The Attorney General still getting the final decision here.
Yeah,
what became public yesterday was the recommendation from the FBI as they did their investigation here.
She raises a good question, though, because normally if you know the law, you're taught that ignorance of the law is normally no defense. There are some cases where clear that you have to have intent. Most of the time that's proven by circumstantial evidence. There are some cases in which ignorance of the law is a defense, but in this case, she was not ignorant of the law. She knew what the law was, and she sought to avoid being part of it. And John, if you'll remember, I would love to have had the FBI question James Carville where he got his information, because he said on live television the reason Hillary Clinton had a private server is because she didn't want Louis Gohmert going through her emails, if you remember that comment. Well, if you're doing that to try to prevent lawful constitutional oversight, then you really may be obstructing the law, and it's not ignorance of the law, it was knowledge of the law that caused it.
Monique's here in Washington, D.C. Line for Democrats. Monique, good morning.
Hi, Monique.
Hello, good morning, you guys. I'm a C-SPAN junkie. I'm calling because I am sick and tired of the congressmen and senators coming on TV, complaining about this person isn't doing this, that person isn't doing that, wasting all of our taxpayers' money. You guys get paid $100 and something thousand a year. Nothing is being done.
What do you want to see done, Monique?
It's more, I'm sorry?
What do you want to see done? What legislation do you want to see passed? What's the most important thing for you?
I want to see jobs. I want to see the environment. I want to see bills passed for jobs, environment, health care. I don't see nothing wrong with the health care, the Obamacare they're just playing. I was paying $500 a month in health insurance. It dropped to $250 because the federal government educated its peoples on how to go about selecting the best health care plan for the American people. I did not know that there was an option for me, so I thank him for that. And as far as the jobs are considered, we need more jobs. And I want to say one more thing. I want to thank Boehner for signing off on DC tag for DC government, for the District of Columbia summer kids to go to college. Okay, my daughter, she is now doing her third year at Marshall University. She is on the dean's list, and I thank him for that scholarship fund. And when she do graduate from college, I'm going to make sure I send him a copy of her college degree, because without that program, she wouldn't be able to attend college. And I thank the Republican Congress for allowing him to do that.
Well, Monique, thanks for the call. On the issue of jobs, which is the one thing or one of several things that she wants to see you and your colleagues work on, let's start there.
Yeah, well, the President said yesterday you sure can't complain about the economy because he has completely cured the economy, but it doesn't sound like Monique quite agrees with that. But we have passed, and I'm glad she brought that up, because we have passed bill after bill that would create new jobs for America, and they normally get blocked by Harry Reid and the Democrats in the Senate.
What's one that you think would do the most?
Well, I think that, for one thing, eliminating much of the regulations that has been shutting down would be a huge help. And we've passed bills that would do that, that would cut back the regulations. They're passed by bureaucrats that are unelected, unaccountable. And if you look, this administration has set records most years, maybe every year, but I think the previous record was around 74,000 pages of new regulations in a year under Bush. but we're hit 79. I think we've hit 80,000 under Obama pages of new regulations every year. People that have started some of the biggest companies in the country have said, we could not start our company today because of the overregulation. We need to fix that. And Obamacare, with all due respect to Monique, her premium has dropped. But I'm hearing from most everybody in my district, yeah, there are a handful that their premiums are lower because they're getting more government help. But most have had their deductible go through the roof. $6,000 for a deductible for somebody making $30,000. That's obscene. Their premiums have gone up so Monique can get help. But the big thing, we've hired, it allowed for about 18,000 new IRS agents who will never help anybody with their health care, but they're getting health care dollars. We got navigators, all these other thousands and thousands of employees in health care that will do nothing to help somebody's health. They're all about the policies. We cut $716 billion. I say we, no Republican voted for the bill, but Obamacare cut that much from Medicare. There are seniors that are not getting the procedures they need. They're not getting the medicine they need, all because of Obamacare. And I'm glad to hear from somebody that helped, because I hear from hundreds and hundreds constantly in my district that are going nuts, that they can't make it with what it's costing and with the deductible, and they're in real trouble because of Obamacare.
We've got about 5 minutes left with Congressman Gohmert. Try to get to as many of your calls as we can. Charlie Herkheimer, New York, line for Republicans. Go ahead, Charlie.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Congressman, referencing an earlier caller who made a statement about other secretaries using a private email. Yeah. Congressman, the answer to that charge is Hillary had no state.gov email account. She conducted 100% of her federal State Department on an open email server. That is the correct response to that charge. Yeah. Okay, now to my point. When James Comey worked for John Ashcroft, he had a reputation for being honest and incorruptible.
That's right.
He ruined that yesterday. Okay? And last night, a former deputy director of the FBI said that he spoke to 12, at least a dozen current agents who are concerned that now that the reputation of the Bureau itself is going to be ruined because of what happened yesterday. Someone said earlier today that if Hillary Clinton got caught walking into the Chinese embassy with a briefcase full of top-secret documents, no charges would be brought against her. This government is totally corrupt.
Well, Charlie, one of those who is concerned is former Attorney General Michael Mukasey. He has a column in today's Wall Street Journal talking about FBI Director Comey's decision, explaining why he wasn't recommending prosecution. Michael Mukasey writes, Director James Comey instead showed that the charges would have been justified. Congressman, I'll let you respond to the caller.
Yeah, well, and he's exactly right. But I hope that it won't destroy the reputation of the FBI, because there are some good FBI agents. There's some wonderful FBI agents. I think Mueller did some damage with the 5-year up or out policy, which cost us thousands and thousands of years of experience. He held over from Bush into
what was that policy,
Obama.
Just for those unfamiliar?
Oh, the 5-year up or out meant if you were in a supervisory position of any kind for 5 years, then at the end of 5 years, you either had to come to Washington or get out.
And you're saying experience lost in that process?
Oh, my word. We lost thousands and thousands of years because so many FBI agents would get to the end of their 5 years and go, I'm not going to Washington. I've got kids here. But the other thing that law enforcement officers, federal and state and local, understand, it takes about 5 years before you gain enough credibility to be trusted by local state law enforcement. And so just when you get that experience, you had to get out. We lost thousands and thousands of years. Now, why would Mueller want a policy like that? I can tell you, when I first got out of law school as a prosecutor, it was a state prosecutor, but I was gung-ho, we're going to go after, and I did well, I knew the law, and I would look around. I know more law than him, but they had experience, and there was something to be said for experience. You need that. So experience can come in and say, yeah, I know you think that's a good idea, but let me explain why it didn't work. It didn't work this year and that year. And so you need that experience. And we drove much of that experience away. What do you get? You get a good, young, aggressive prosecutor or FBI agent who's going to salute the flag, do whatever he says, thinking it's okay to cut corners on the law, and that's not a good idea. We need those experienced people, and Mueller drove many of those out.
Let's try to get in James. He's been waiting for a while in Tom's River, New Jersey, line for Democrats. James, can you make it quick?
Yes, good morning, Washington Journal listeners, and good morning, John, and good morning, Ruby.
Good morning.
What's your question, James?
Well, I have a comment. In Australia, they had a big problem with guns. Now, I'm ignorant to what they did, but I know they almost eliminated all the gun violence in Australia. And the reason why they did it, because money wasn't involved in it. See, in this country, we're a capitalist country. And everything revolves about money. And I don't care what politician says it doesn't, he's a liar. Everything's about money. Children can get murdered, old people can get murdered, but the bottom line is money.
Well, Congressman, I'll give you a chance to have a quick response.
Well, the Bible says money is not evil, but the love of money is the root of evil. And so there is something to money corrupting, and lots of money may be absolutely corrupting. It is a problem. My wife and I cashed out everything we had, our retirements, in order to run for Congress. I'm all in. I'm completely invested in trying to make this country better. And I respect people willing to do that, and I get frustrated by people who think money is the end-all, be-all. And Comey never addressed that secondary investigation on the Clinton Foundation, the massive amounts of money they collected, and the way that it affected the State Department's decisions after money was collected. That was a part of the investigation. It's like all of a sudden those things don't matter. It was corrupting.
Before we let you go, Donald Trump's scheduled to meet with House and Senate Republicans tomorrow.
Yes.
Capitol Hill, if you get a chance to ask him a question, what's the question you'll ask him?
I'm not sure. Again, I would like for him to apologize to Ted Cruz, calling him a liar when he was, the most honest guy in the field, I think. Some of the allegations of Ted were just absolutely over the top. But it looks like he'll be our nominee. And so we'll see. A lot of my questions are often driven by what's said when I get there.
Congressman Louis Gohmert, a frequent guest on the Washington Journal. Come back, join us again.
Thanks so much, John. I really appreciate your candor.